In the run for the nomination for the Republican Party, there are big names like Giuliani, Romney, even McCain. And there are others whose names may be a little lesser known. Texas Congressman Ron Paul is holding steady at about 1% in the polls, but his enthusiasm and libertarian views are attracting attention in each debate. We are very happy to have Dr. Ron Paul with us in the studio today. Thank you and welcome to Daily Cafe.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
You certainly are in a better financial position than John McCain at the moment, and certainly because you don't have any debt. You've raised about $2 million. That's very good in the coffers, but your recognition isn't as wide as some of the other names that I mentioned. How do you plan to improve that?
Well, all we have to do is continue to do what we're doing. We have actually raised more than $3 million. We have 2.4 in the bank. So we're getting a lot of publicity, and we're not spending our money, and we're doing it through the internet. Matter of fact, a Gallup poll today showed me 3 times higher than the poll yesterday, and that is that we're at 3%, but still, quite low. But if you went to the internet, you'd think we were winning. But no, we have to continue to grow in the number of people who support us and get more money and be prepared. I mean, there were a lot of candidates in the past who were at 1 and 2 or 3% that went on to win at this time of the cycle. But this cycle is a tighter cycle this time, so we have to work faster because of the early primaries, but at the same time, nobody's been able to quite harness the internet like we have. So we
Why
remain
did you
optimistic.
choose the internet? I mean, was that an accident or was it purposeful?
No, the internet chose me because I've taken a position very, very strong on First Amendment rights and tax rights. Don't tax the internet, don't interfere with it, which is a risky position because some people like to regulate the internet so none of the bad stuff gets out there. But I've taken a very pure civil libertarian point of view of not getting involved in the internet. And young people like freedom. They like to be left alone. And it's been very attractive to many, many people. And we have found that many young people who find some of my speeches and comments and debates and they put them on the internet and they influence their parents. So many kids are coming to the office. They're not even of voting age, but they're bringing their parents. And the parents are interested because young people got fascinated through the internet. So it's an interesting way of this is coming about. It's really a grassroots, spontaneous
It's
operation.
certainly a new way to campaign, there's
right.
no question. But most pollsters would consider you still a long shot for the Republican nomination. How do you expect to close that gap, and what's your purpose in this campaign?
Well, the purpose, if you enter, is obvious to win. If you didn't, you would be
Do you actually think
insecure.
you're going to get the Republican nomination?
Well, there are 10 of us right now, and everybody can't win, so everybody has to answer that same question. I would think that a person like John McCain has a different attitude today than he did 6 months
Certainly.
ago. So it's up and down, and yes. But no, I have always been a philosophic candidate, and the message is very, very important. I'm secondary to the message, secondary to the philosophy, and the philosophy is what is attractive to so many. And people are willing to walk the street and make the signs and get on the internet because it's a powerful message. A message of freedom is something that people like to hear. Just get the government off our back and out of our lives. It's very, very appealing.
Which is the libertarian view. Let's talk a little bit about the message that you have out there. You're opposed to the war in Iraq. If you were elected president, what would you do differently? How would you get us out of there?
I would just come home.
Right away?
Yeah. Well, you can't do it right away.
So what would be the time frame?
As quickly as you could, whether it's 6 months or a year, but you do it deliberately. You send out a message and say, we've had it. This is it. All the conditions that the authority was given to the president are gone. There are no weapons of mass destruction, and there's no regime to enforce UN resolutions, and therefore the authority doesn't really exist. And so we would come home, and I'd get the Navy away from Iran and quit threatening Iran, and just have a different attitude about foreign policy. Matter of fact, it would be an attitude that was expressed very clearly in the year 2000 when the current president advocated a humble foreign policy, no nation building, no policing the world. That sounded pretty good to me. But I would follow through with that. I would have that type of foreign policy that we won with in the year 2000.
Yet allegedly this president is fighting a war on terrorism. We still are engaged in an act of terror. We have allegedly the al-Qaeda building up their forces. How would you fight that?
Well, I think what we're doing is we're encouraging the terrorists because there were no terrorists in Iraq before, and now there are. We're threatening war with Iran. You've never seen a Persian suicide terrorist. They don't exist. But if we meddle there, we're probably going to get them. So the longer we're over there, I think the more danger we're in because our military ability to defend ourselves is being diminished all the time, let alone not counting, the tragic loss of lives And how are we ever going to pay for this? I mean, this is the problem. They're cutting back and trying to nickel and dime some of these programs at home. At the same time, they have to keep spending on the military. I mean, we literally could save hundreds of billions of dollars if we changed our foreign policy. I believe, sincerely, we would be safer. At the same time, we could at least tide some people over who have become so dependent on the government. But today, it's all threatened because we live in the age of inflation, and we're going to have trouble meeting the obligations domestically because the cost of living is going up so rapidly for retired people, for people on fixed income.
Absolutely.
And that's where the trouble is coming. No matter how fast we raise the benefits, and the government fudges the figures, they claim the cost of living is going up 2.6%. If you use the old CPI, it's going up 10%. So that's the discrepancy. So people in retirement can't keep up with this, and as long as we have the foreign policy we have, we're going to face a major financial crisis.
Part of the libertarian view, as you've said, is to get government off our backs. You voted against the Patriot Act. That's supposedly there to protect us. What is your view about that?
Well, it's always supposed to. You know, if you voted against it, you're supposed to be considered unpatriotic. That's always what they challenge you. If you challenge the status quo, you're un-American. If you don't vote for these wars, then you're not supporting the troops. And this is just, you know, I think it's demagoguery. I believe sincerely that you shouldn't have to ever sacrifice any liberties to provide security. And that was the very first thing that we did, was we sacrificed our liberties, and we're not safer because we haven't changed our foreign policy.
So how would we be safer?
If we change our foreign policy, well, we would neutralize the incentive for the reason that they have been so angry with us. We have to look for the motives. It's sort of like, how do you look into a murder without looking for motives? And there are motives, and they express them. They're explicit, and they tell us exactly why. So I think we have to deal with that. We shouldn't ignore our enemies. Instead, we have more al-Qaeda every single day. We serve as the incentive. We are the recruiting agent for Osama bin Laden.
We're running out of time. I have two questions I want to ask you. You also are in favor of repealing the income tax, but without a replacement revenue stream. How would you do that?
Well, you have to change the role of government. Foreign policy-wise, you could save $300 or $400 billion a year just by changing.
And use that as a revenue stream instead.
Sure, and you would still have revenues. I mean, it's only about 40% or so that you get from income tax, but the income tax is a vicious form of taxation. It's based on the assumption that the government owns you, your life, and all your income, and the government permits you to own a certain percent. So the principle is so bad. It's the way they collect it that's unconstitutional. They force you to keep the records. That's involuntary servitude, and then you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. It's so un-American. So just think, we lived a long time without an income tax, and we've developed the problems of big government, loss of liberties, and more war once we got the income tax.
Finally, as a woman, I can't resist this question. You know where I'm going. You are adamantly pro-life on the issue of abortion. Don't you think that this is really a medical issue as opposed to a political issue?
No, it's a life issue. The question is whether a fetus that weighs 8 pounds or 9 pounds right before birth has legal rights. And I, as a physician, an OB doctor, realize that if I don't take care of that fetus right, I can be sued. And if you are in an accident and kill somebody else's fetus, you're liable. If there's an act of violence, people are liable. So the fetus has legal rights. The one thing that I make the point is...
What if the mother is in danger? Her life is in danger.
Well, that's more complicated, but the solution for the more complicated issues is, you know, who handles this? Under our system, it's supposed to be in the states. We're not supposed to have one law that legalizes everything anytime, and there's no respect whatsoever for life, or the government makes a prohibition. The federal government, I'm opposed to all the federal regulations because they are difficult circumstances, but there's a lot of variation on how we treat violence and punish violence at the state level. And juries and judges and laws are variable. And I think this difficult issue should be handled that way, and that's what is so miraculous about our system. It allows for this kind of solution rather than one solution for everybody, either by a court or by a Congress. That's what I oppose to. That's what I'm opposed to.
Dr. Paul, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Pleasure to talk to you. And, of course, good luck in the campaign.